Part 6. Teachers, social workers, police, lawyers, judges, higher court judges, Supreme Court judges, senators, prime ministers, and world leaders all have a boss. And everyone, from the bottom to the top, must kiss someone's ass. The reason why I write it like that is because of the abuse of power and the power dynamic of the less powerful. If you want to keep your job, your career, you will do things that go against your personal beliefs, and then you have to find ways to cope with the inner conflict that arises. You will suffer mental anguish and poor mental health. Some may say that some of the worst people in the world could care less. They are sociopaths or psychopaths, and they have the ability to sleep at night like babies. But that is not true. Everyone suffers in one way or another, and no one is ever really free from their personal issues. Every living human must cope with the reality of life. It is how one copes that makes the difference. Eventually, without a healthy intervention, you will get sick, resulting in really bad habits, sick choices, and it gets worse with the added power that one has. Everyone has the power to do stupid things, but we often make a healthier choice by behaving ourselves. The result is that we end up with pent-up energy from a buildup of aggression and anxiety. People tend to find creative, healthy ways, but also sometimes really sick ways to release that energy. For example, one defense mechanism people use is called displacement. Displacement basically means that when you are under stress and you have no healthy way to cope with the stress, you displace your inner conflict onto someone or something else. For example, a person who is harassed at work may come home and rather than choosing a healthier way to cope with stress, chooses to kick the dog. The power dynamic of the master and the dog in this case is an example of displacement. It is an example of an abuse of power because the dog doesn't know why it is the target of aggression. It just has to take the beating. You would think the master would know better, but in most cases, people in authority believe they are not even aware they are doing something that goes against their core values, but they only deceive themselves. The boss knows ahead of time that they should not harass their employee, but they do it anyway, and the walls of self-deception go up, and they go into denial and other defense mechanisms. The employee knows ahead of time they will go home to kick the dog, and they know that it is wrong, even before they do it, but they do it anyway, and then the walls of denial go up. The poor dog just has to live with its reality of being kicked around. The boss, the employer, are both the dog. It may be for this reason that people often get pets, according to some researchers. Another example is when a teacher is being harassed at home or at work, or had some trauma in their life. They must reconcile alone without help or healthy intervention, and it eats away at them. All of the professionals mentioned previously were all once children, learning their roles in our society, and they all come with baggage. They believe that by following a list of rules and regulations, laws, or codes of laws, or simply known as the code, they will be good enough or even better than others, have a reputation, but they all kick the dog. The code is a list of thou shalts and thou shalt nots, or in other words, one and not one, a binary code of zeros and ones, a code that comes from the one, in which everything else is nothing. At some point in all of our lives, we are confronted with power and the abuse of power. We all learn that when things are not fair, we can plead our case to an adult, who will then judge what is fair. and not fair based on the evidence and the case we plead and who pleads it. We all learn that even though we believe we are innocent, we are at times found guilty, and sometimes, even though the evidence proves our innocence, the application of justice is not fair. Without a sense of justice, we all learn that the world we live in is not fair. And so what do we do about it? What do we do about it? How do we get rid of the feeling of injustice, unfairness, powerlessness, and the consequences of all of that? We have the code, which means that something is in fact something, but in a case of injustice, something turns out to be nothing. Logically, which children and students understand, just does not compute. Using binary coefficients, the math just does not add up. Confused, and as children we ask if something plus something equals something, and according to someone in authority we learn that it doesn't amount to anything. And if this process repeats itself in our lives, we take it personal. We might question what happened, and we may have to make the 0 and the 1 add up, which requires poor math or logic in a situation of injustice. We have to force a square peg into a round hole, or if it won't go, so to speak, we pretend it went in. We distort reality to cope with the illogical situation we face. Or we can't distort reality. We can't unsee the injustice. We must live with it, and we know we are helpless, powerless, defenseless. When we face these situations repeatedly during child development, we learn what psychologists call learned helplessness. The belief that there is nothing we can do or say to change the situation. Without help, a child's innocence is vulnerable to corruption.